BoogeyMan band coming round the bend. Is BoogeyMan band? Is BoogeyMan band?
Greetings, my fellow Fright Fiends. Thanks so much for stopping by the Horror Zone channel. I hope everyone's doing well. Today's video is going to be something that I've been wanting to talk about for a while. I've sort of been planning out my videos for the last couple of weeks. I did a post saying that one of my upcoming videos was going to be my top 10 horror movie sequels. Now, growing up, I was somebody that really liked sequels. I like continuations of stories. You know, the 80s were huge for the slashers, like the Nightmare on Elm Streets and Friday the 13th. The Halloween's a little bit less, and same thing with Texas Chainsaw Massacre. We got a lot of Nightmare on Elm Streets. We got a lot of Friday the 13th. Yeah, there's a lot of great horror sequels out there. I don't think get enough credit still to this day. There's some of them that I enjoy even more than the original films. So this is going to be in order from 10 all the way to number 1. And I hope everyone enjoys this. I've really been looking forward to doing this. So let's get started. Here we go. So number 10 for me is going to be 2005's Saw 2. Now, I have seen every Saw film in the movie theater from the original all the way up through Saw 10. I was really looking forward to Saw 11 coming out this year, but it sounds like that might not come to be. But the movie that really made me a fan of the Saw franchise was the second film. Saw 2, I think, is so much better than the original film. I don't know what it is about the film. I think it just has to do with the fact that you have these people that are trapped in this house, this poison gas is going into it, and you juxtapose that with the character Eric Matthews and John Kramer. You know, sort of, he's tracked down John Kramer. Him and Allison Carey, played by Dina Meyer, have tracked him down and, you know, finally gotten to him. And then what happens is Detective Matthews realizes that his son Daniel is amongst the people that are in this house where this poison gas is being pumped into this derelict house. And then at the same time, you have these games that they have to play. There's one set up for pretty much each one of them, like we've seen historically throughout the Saw films. And I just feel like this established the Saw, you know, playbook so well of what you could expect. And it's remains my favorite in the franchise. I know a lot of people really loved Saw 10, and I did too, but Saw 2 is just pretty much untouchable for me. I also love that Amanda Young, the Shawnee Smith character, she was kind of thrust back into a new game by Jigsaw. And, you know, there's this great twist at the end. And I just think it's a brilliant film. And I think Darren Lynn Bousman did a great job directing it. So, yeah, Saw 2 has always been my favorite. And we're coming up, I mean, this year it's the 20th anniversary of the film, which is absolutely insane. And in 20 years, nothing has been able to unseat it for me in the franchise. Number 9 for me is going to be Amityville II: The Possession. This film came out in 1982. It was based on the novel A Murder in Amityville by Hans Holzer. Tommy Lee Wallace actually did the screenplay for it. And for me, Amityville II: The Possession has always been the best. And, you know, you have the Montelli family. Of course, they're kind of based on the DeFeos because this is a prequel. But you have, like, an abusive husband played by Burt Young. And you have the incestuous relationship between Sonny and Patricia, Jack Magner and Diane Franklin. And then you have the character of Father Adamski, who is kind of someone that gets involved with the family. You know, the family is religious and he's there to bless the house, and things start happening. He kind of develops a friendship with the Patricia character, and the son, Sonny, gets possessed. And I still think it's one of the scariest films ever made. But there's some truly horrific scenes in this when Sonny goes through the house killing the family. And just some of the camera techniques that director Damiani uses when the entity is stalking Sonny through the house. There's just some really, really cringy, scary moments in this film, and it still holds up. I think everybody in it does a great job, and just this kind of fractured family moving into this home and being corrupted by the spirits and the evil that lives there. It's very scary. Still the best Amityville movie ever made, in my opinion. Number 8 on my list is a newer film. This is a film that came out last year and one that I unfortunately didn't get to see in the movie theaters, but it's one that I have been watching religiously since it came out to buy digitally. Smile 2, Parker Finn's follow-up to his 2022 film, which I love. It was one of my favorite movies that year, but Smile 2 was my favorite movie last year, and I think 100% of it goes to Naomi Scott as Sky Riley. She just blows me away in this role. I think that it puts it in a new perspective, because in the first film you have this doctor that's going through it, the character that Saucy Bacon played. In this one, you have a mega superstar like a Taylor Swift or Lady Gaga that's in the spotlight constantly. And this entity is just manipulating her constantly. And just the way Naomi Scott plays it, she really makes you feel like she is somebody that is completely going mad. I cannot say enough great things about everybody that was in it. I mean, it was great to see Kyle Gallner come back as Joel. I love that actor. I also like Lucas Gage as Lewis. It was great to see Jack Nicholson's son, Ray Nicholson, who just gave me Shining vibes in terms of, he looks like a youthful Jack Nicholson, and some of his expressions and things like that were just really, really haunting. This is Naomi Scott's show, and just that, and the desperation that she's going through, and just Parker Finn's amazing direction, and that ending just punched me in the gut, and I'm like, holy fuck, how are they going to top this in a third one? They have to do a third film. Number 7 for me is going to be The Exorcist III, which came out in 1990. I did see this in the movie theater with my good buddy Mike Dodson when I was a kid. We were really close friends. We went and saw this, and I remember it was an empty theater. I think there was maybe 2 other people in it, and this movie scared the shit out of us. And I had just watched the original Exorcist. I had rented it for the first time from the Warehouse. I don't know if people remember the Warehouse. That's where I used to love to rent movies before the Blockbuster days. But watched The Exorcist III, and not only did I think, I was a fan of Brad Dourif. I knew him from movies like Fatal Beauty and, of course, Child's Play and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. I was also a huge fan of the actor Ed Flanders, who played Father Dyer in the film, and, of course, I knew him from Salem's Lot, where he played Bill Norton. And the relationship between Father Dyer and Kinderman, played by the late, great George C. Scott, I thought was just so compelling. They just felt like good friends, and that's how, the movie kicks off. It also kicks off with this horrific murder. I just think this movie just shines, and it really got raked over the coals by critics and things like that. And I just remember, negativity towards it. And I'm glad that in recent years, people have really embraced this film. For me, it's the best film in the Exorcist franchise. I appreciate the original Exorcist. I think it's a great film. It's not a film I revisit very often. I've seen it maybe 6-7 times in my lifetime. But the third film I've watched so many times, and I just think it's truly scary. And then there's that infamous jump scare moment in the film that I think is done so effectively because of where the camera is positioned, and you just see the nurse going from room to room and back to her, like her little podium or whatever you want to call it, and then at one moment she's walking down the hall and the camera zooms and you see this shrouded, cloaked figure with these bone shears right behind her, and you don't see the decapitation, but it implies what happened. And there's many moments like this in the film where it's more about what they're saying as opposed to what they're showing, and I think that could be so much more graphic because we're using our imaginations, and what they're saying is so disturbing. And there's just little moments in this film where you hear voices, or just the way with the scene in the hospital, the camera angles, when there's this one point where this elderly woman is crawling on the ceiling and Kinderman is oblivious to it, and she's looking down at him, and just odd dreams that are very scary and surreal, and it's just such a brilliant film. And Brad Dourif is so good as the Gemini Killer. It was great to also see Jason Miller reprise his role, Damien Karras, from the original Exorcist. Absolutely fantastic film. Can't say enough great things about it. And number 6 for me is going to be 1986's Aliens, of course, the sequel to Alien, the Ridley Scott film from 1979. And I absolutely adore Aliens. I just recently got to meet Michael Biehn, who played Dwayne Hicks. Just, we had a nice conversation, and he said he really felt like Aliens was James Cameron's best film, and I told him between Aliens and Terminator, those are my favorite Cameron films. But Aliens is the perfect sequel. It picks up, 57 years after the original film. Ellen Ripley is found, and she's been sort of in cryosleep ever since the events of the first film. And she's found by like this deep space salvage team. And when communications are lost on the planet LV-426, where her crew first encountered the alien creatures, Ripley agrees to return to the site with a unit of Marines to investigate. It doesn't try to imitate anything that Alien was. It's its own thing, and it's a continuation of the Ellen Ripley character. And everybody in the film is so great, from the late great Bill Paxton, who I miss terribly, to Lance Henriksen. You also have Paul Reiser, you have Michael Biehn, who I adore, and then you have the amazing Sigourney Weaver playing one of the best and strongest female protagonists ever in cinema history as Ellen Ripley. And just the scenes in the film, especially when she goes to save Newt and take on the Queen. The last half of this film is just so on the edge of your seat and terrifying, and it's such a brilliant film. Number 5 for me is going to be 2019's Dr. Sleep, which was a sequel to Stanley Kubrick's The Shining, done by Mike Flanagan. And I think Ewan McGregor as Danny Torrance is absolutely fantastic. You see this tortured man that's living with, this gift that he has, and also the sins of his father, and trying to be a better man after sort of, letting the things that brought his father to his breaking point affect him. And I just think that Kylie Curran as Abra is also fantastic in it, but Rebecca Ferguson as Rose the Hat is such a terrific adversary. And the fact that it deals with like these vampire nomads that feed off people that have the Shining to stay young and youthful, it's just such a great idea. And just how it all culminates in this final showdown at the Overlook Hotel, which in the novel, for spoilers, if people don't want to be spoiled, but in the novel, the Overlook burns down. And because that didn't happen in Kubrick's film, it's brought to fruition in this film. So I think just the fact that this movie existed, the fact that they recreated so many iconic sets from the original Shining, I think Mike Flanagan is just a genius, and I am so grateful that this movie exists. I'm glad that it's finally getting, the recognition it so deserved. When it came out nearly 6 years ago, it's one of the greatest sequels ever made. It's one of the greatest Stephen King movies ever made. Number 4 for me is going to be Friday the 13th, The Final Chapter. This is the 4th film in the franchise. It came out in 1984, starring Corey Feldman, Kimberly Beck, Crispin Glover, Judy Aronson, the late great Ted White, the late Eric Anderson, directed by Joe Zito. I will forever say that this is the scariest film in the Friday the 13th franchise. And it scared me more than any of the other films, really. I mean, I was scared of Part 3 and Part 2, but for some reason, there's just something different about them. This movie, there's a meanness to this film. And when I say that, I think it's just the fact that you had a seasoned stuntman in Ted White playing Jason, and Jason is just so much more brutal in this film. And it's also the way that I think Joe Zito brilliantly directed the film. You don't see Jason very much. You see his shadow, things like that. You really don't see him in full until the end of the film. And that is a huge strength for this film. Also, it was the first time that it dealt with kids. You have a young kid that is trying to survive these attacks from Jason, and you have his sister protecting him. And I think Kimberly Beck and Corey Feldman just had a terrific rapport, and you really felt like they were brother and sister. The isolation of the house, the two houses that are, facing each other. You have the house that the kids are in, and then you have the Jarvis house, which was a real house. The other house was a facade that they built. And this, I also think it has one of the best openings of any of the Friday the 13th, because it picks up exactly where Part 3 left off. You go back to Higgins Haven, so you go back to the exact location from the third film, and you see them cart Jason off to the hospital. So he is dead. He's still in the exact same spot he was in at the end of Part 3. And then he wakes up in the morning and he starts, wreaking havoc and returns to Crystal Lake. But I do think it's got some of the scariest scenes. It's got some of the greatest kills because they brought Tom Savini back. I still think Doug's death in the shower is one of the best because Jason just uses his hands to crush his head against the shower tiles, and even Ted White said that was one of his favorite kills. But yeah, it's got a kick-ass ending where Tommy Jarvis actually takes on Jason in the guise of young Jason, and haunting. The final shot of this film still gives me goosebumps when I watch it, and still is terrifying, and it's just a perfect Friday the 13th, and remains one of my favorite films of all time. So number 3 is going to be Jason Lives, Friday the 13th Part 6. This is my favorite Friday the 13th movie. Always will be. This was the film that made me the Jason fan that I remain today. Friday the 13th is my favorite horror franchise of all time. And this film was a film I saw in the movie theater when I was 12 years old, August 1st, 1986. My mom took me to see it that weekend. I think Tom McLaughlin did a terrific job directing this. And you have Tom Matthews as Tommy Jarvis. Not my favorite Tommy Jarvis, but I do like him in the film. I prefer John Shepherd and, of course, Corey Feldman in the role. But you also have Jennifer Cook as Megan Garris, who's awesome in it. And you also have Tom Fridley, who I have met, and he's awesome. I did meet Tom Matthews as well. And CJ Graham, who is my favorite Jason of all time, just kicks ass in this film. And I just love this film. And I realized early on watching it as a 12-year-old that this was going to be a fun Friday the 13th film. It just, Jason being struck by lightning, being brought back to life, being kind of like this half human, half zombie that's been rotting in the ground for a number of years, and going back to Camp Crystal Lake, which has been renamed Camp Forest Green because they're trying to sort of put Jason and everything, the legend of Crystal Lake, in the past, and the fact that there's kids at the camp, and it's just such a fun film. The culmination with Tommy taking on Jason in the middle of Camp Crystal Lake, trying to put him back in his watery grave where he drowned in 1957. I think it's a terrific film with a kick-ass ending, and it will always be my favorite Friday the 13th. And number 2 for me, this is one that I have been singing its praises forever. I've always said that it's sort of just it's the same story, so I always say it's like it's a 1-2 punch, and that is going to be Halloween 2, which came out in 1981, directed by Rick Rosenthal, starring Jamie Lee Curtis, the late great Donald Pleasance, Dick Warlock, the late Charles Cyphers. I love Halloween 2 so much. It's the first Halloween film that I ever watched in full. I saw it a few times when I was a kid. The times I remember very vividly watching it is there was like a Halloween horror marathon on cable television. My friend Tori was over, and I remember watching Halloween 2 and Friday the 13th Part 2. And then when my dad was going through a divorce, he was living with his brother, my Uncle Jack, in San Jose, and we rented it. And I remember watching it, and I've talked about this before when talking about people I've met at cons. Meeting Dick Warlock a year and a half ago at Halloween 45 was one of the greatest thrills for me, because I was able to tell him that he is my favorite Michael Myers actor, and I know he played it off like I say that to everybody, but he truly is and always has been. He scares me to the core. And still to this day, when I watch Halloween 2, I don't know what it is. I know he's wearing the same mask that Nick Castle wore in the original, but it just looks different because he's shaped differently than Nick Castle, and he just looks more demented in the part. And I love the robotic walk that he has, and there's just some truly horrific moments in this film. And so many people complain about Halloween 2 because Laurie Strode is kind of sidelined, but it makes sense why she's sidelined. She's been hurt from the events of the first film. I love that this focuses a little bit more on Dr. Loomis, Donald Pleasance, who will always be my hero, and I love his character. The Dr. Loomis character has always been one of my favorite characters. I remember watching this film with my dad at my Uncle Jack's, and when Dr. Loomis sacrifices himself at the end, which at the time was the curtain call for both him and Michael Myers. It broke my heart because I realized that Dr. Loomis had killed himself to stop Michael Myers from trying to kill Laurie or anybody else that got in his way. And it just really, it sat with me for so long, and really just, it haunted me. And when Halloween 4 was announced and they said Donald Pleasance was coming back, and Loomis, of course, had suffered burns and damage from the explosion at the hospital. I was so grateful that Donald Pleasence was going to be playing that character again. That's how important he was to me and remains. And you know, it's sad we've lost so many of these wonderful actors and people that brought these movies to life. But yeah, Halloween 2 is just a special film for me, and it's a 1-2 punch. It is a continuation of that first film. It picks up exactly where that film leaves off and keeps going, and no sequel, not even the ones that have come out, the David Gordon Green films, can take its place. And I was really angry that it was pulled from canon, and it was just, the new films were just a sequel to that original film. I think it would have been so much more powerful, the David Gordon Green films, if they tied into Halloween 2 as well. But definitely number one for me is going to be Psycho 2. Psycho 2 is such a special film for me, and when it aired on HBO, my mom let me watch it, and she had no idea how obsessed I would become with this film. And I think it came from the fact that I was empathetic towards the Norman Bates character, having no context of the original Psycho film. Outside of remembering that I had seen like bits and pieces of it, I hadn't seen it in full and wouldn't see it in full for another couple of years. But I just felt so much empathy for the Norman Bates character and just what he's going through, trying to sort of come back to society after being committed for over 2 decades. And the character of Lila Loomis, played by Vera Miles, trying to drive him nuts again, and using her daughter, Mary, to sort of help push him over the edge. And I just think Tom Holland wrote a brilliant script, and I think Richard Franklin did such a great job bringing us back to this world, and having a different, and again, doing something different with a sequel, not making it like the original Psycho or making it like the, you know, the slasher films that were coming out at the time. It wasn't like, you know, a bunch of young kids breaking into the Psycho house and being tormented by a killer. It was about a man trying to sort of come back to society, having committed the sins that he had, and not being allowed to live his life. That stigma of what had happened to him, not only being abused by his mother, but sort of going off the deep end and becoming his mother and committing murders in her guise. Not even the rehabilitation could take away what he had done. And you just see, you know, the character of Dr. Raymond that the late great Robert Loggia played, you know, trying to help him. You know, when things start happening, he starts seeing people dressed up. He starts seeing his mother show up in the window of her bedroom and things like that. And you have the Toomey character who was running the motel when he was committed, who's just, you know, trying to mess with him and things like that. And it's such a great mystery until the end of the film, when you find out what has actually been going on and who's been pulling the strings. It's such a brilliant film, and it still is such a tragic, scary, wonderfully made sequel to a classic. And as much as I love Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho, it's one of my favorite movies of all time. Psycho 2 is above it in every way for me, because it was the first movie I saw in the franchise. It was my introduction to the Norman Bates character. It was my introduction to Anthony Perkins as an actor. It was a movie that made me fall in love with him and Meg Tilly, who I think was absolutely amazing in the film. The scenes with her and Norman together are so great. The fate that befalls the Mary Loomis character has always bothered me, even though she was kind of, you know, responsible for what ends up happening to Norman. And as the film draws to its conclusion, the film is just a masterpiece to me. I can quote it pretty much verbatim, and I think it's got one of the best soundtracks by the late, great Jerry Goldsmith, a haunting soundtrack that is my second favorite score to a film after Harry Sukman's score for Salem's Lot. But I've loved it since I saw it as a 10-year-old kid in 1984, summer of 1984, and, you know, 41 years later, I still love it just as much. So that is it, my fellow fiends. I want to thank everyone for taking the time to watch this video, sharing my thoughts on the greatest horror sequels, top 10 horror sequels of all time. And again, this is just my list. These are the films that mean so much to me, but I'm curious to hear other people's thoughts on horror sequels, please feel free to share your thoughts down in the comment section below. Let me know what some of your favorite horror movie sequels are. I'm really excited to talk about this subject for a while now. So again, thank you so much everyone for watching. I hope everyone's doing well, and I'll talk to you again real soon. Take it easy. Stay scared as always. Peace. Hey my fellow Fright Fiends, I just want to thank everyone for supporting BoogeyMan Ben's Horror Zone. If you haven't yet subscribed and you'd like to, please hit the subscribe button down below, click the bell notification so you're updated every time I drop a new video. I try to drop a video at least once or twice a week. The Horror Zone is a passion of mine, and it really makes me happy that I can share that passion with all of you guys. Thanks so much again for the support, and I'll talk to you again real soon. Take it easy, stay scared as always. Peace.